Enabling a better tomorrow. Boundary. Boundary is the last segment of the understanding component of the enabling a better tomorrow model. There's been a number of people who have asked, does boundary really belong in the understanding segment, or does it belong in the strategy segment? And the answer is a resounding yes. It's appropriate for the stakeholders to understand the boundary, and it's appropriate to understand the boundary when one develops the strategy that's to be implemented. And that should be evident in a moment when I talk in a bit more detail about the nature of the boundary itself. So when I talked about analysis and synthesis, I talked about the context for the situation itself, so that set of interactions that's responsible for what the situation is in terms of those pieces that are addressable. They're part of the situation itself as opposed to being part of the environment around it. In other words, there's for a given situation there are a certain number of things that you or the stakeholders are in a position to influence. They're the addressable segment of the situation, and the environment, which is not addressable, is simply something that you need to figure out how to deal with or accommodate. So there's a boundary that defines the addressability segment, and then there are a set of boundaries that are also established to identify which things are the responsibility of which stakeholders. Fortunate is one who finds a situation for which there is only one stakeholder. It's a lot easier to deal with things, though seldom is that the case. So in terms of moving forward in identifying the elements that interact, it's appropriate to understand who's responsible for what, because they're the ones that will have to add or remove or make changes to the elements that they're responsible for and the interactions with them between elements that are the responsibility of other stakeholders. So while stakeholder number 3 is responsible for these two components and the relationship between them, and can probably modify that relationship in any way that they choose, this element and this element are the responsibility of two different stakeholders, and the relationship between them is something that the two of them have to figure out how to deal with, as opposed to it being something that can be unilaterally altered moving forward. So boundary is important for two different reasons. One, to identify those elements that are part of the addressable situation and what's outside of it to be part of the environment, and a number of boundaries within the addressability arena to identify which things are the responsibility of which stakeholders. If you determine that to really deal with the situation, some of the elements that are part of the environment have to be addressed, then the boundary for the situation has to be expanded, and additional stakeholders have to be brought into figuring out the answer to how to deal with the situation, because internally it's just next to impossible to influence the environment, because it's the responsibility of some other set of stakeholders. So hope this makes sense. I'll see you in the next video as we move on to the strategy segment. Bye.